Ontario just passed Bill 60, which is arguably the most significant reform to landlord-tenant laws in the past decade. But what you might not know is that, while it appears to protect landlords on the surface, in reality, it's actually protecting tenants. Why? Let me explain in 3 minutes. First, the eviction process for unpaid rent. Before, when landlords faced professional tenants, it could take months, even half a year, to evict them. Bill 60 has greatly shortened this process. This makes it much harder for tenants who deliberately withhold rent to keep dragging things out, and it's now easier for landlords to reclaim their property for personal use. Previously, if a landlord wanted to move in themselves, they had to compensate the tenant with 1 month's rent or provide alternative accommodation. Under the new law, that compensation requirement is gone. Landlords now only need to give 120 days notice. As for the LTB, the Landlord and Tenant Board, there's an efficiency reform. Previously, cases would pile up and be delayed for years, but the situation will be improved, allowing reasonable disputes to be resolved more quickly. All of this might sound like it's helping landlords, but the core problem goes beyond that. After years in real estate, I've seen many examples. The more laws favor tenants, the more reluctant landlords are to rent and the pickier they get. Why? Because old laws gave malicious tenants too much protection, making landlords fear professional tenants who refuse to leave. So, landlords screen more, requiring high income and excellent credit. They also want tenants with stable families. Some landlords even choose simply not to rent at all. What does this lead to? The tenants who need help the most actually find it even harder to rent, and as the supply of rental housing drops, rents only get more expensive. The competition becomes even fiercer. This is a classic case of an over-regulated market, where intervention actually ends up hurting vulnerable groups. That's why I always say, honestly, the old rental laws were a textbook case of good intentions gone wrong. As for Bill 60, by shifting things to the right, landlords face less risk, so they're more willing to put their properties back on the market, more willing to give new students and newcomers a chance, and they won't set the screening criteria ridiculously high anymore. What does this mean? It means market confidence is restored, landlords are more willing to rent, and tenants will find it easier to get housing. Rent prices will become more stable. To put it plainly, protecting the interests of landlords is actually the best way to protect tenants in the long run. Because if landlords don't invest or rent out their properties, tenants simply have nowhere to live. In the end, Bill 60 originally proposed a very important reform, which was later withdrawn, that would have allowed landlords, after a fixed-term lease like a 1-year lease expires, to choose not to renew, and the tenant would have to move out. In other words, whether to continue renting should be a mutual agreement between both parties. It shouldn't be something that's decided unilaterally by the tenant. Under the current law, tenants can leave at any time when their lease ends, but when a landlord's lease ends, they can't simply say they don't want to rent anymore. This is essentially an unfair and asymmetric power dynamic, and it goes against market rules and the principle of private property rights. I sincerely hope this issue can be revisited and pushed forward in the future. Because only when the rental relationship can be freely ended will landlords truly be willing to relax their conditions, be open to renting, and willing to invest. And who benefits the most from that? The tenants, of course. Bill 66 isn't perfect, but it's an important step in the right direction. It makes the market fairer, encourages landlords to rent out their properties, and makes it easier for tenants to find a safe home. I'm Pri Han, your trusted choice for first-time home buying and selling, and first-time upgrading in the Greater Toronto Area. With the new policies in place, click on my profile to chat about how to choose great tenants.